Pasteur. He was in France, she was in England. When she heard of Louis Pasteur's theory, she said, "This is the theory of a man of a very unstable mind." She said, "Germs don't cause disease, they're the result. They're the result of unhealthful conditions." Florence Nightingale's story is very interesting. You see, in 1854, she was asked to go to Scutari. So what's Scutari? Here is the Black Sea. Scutari is the port where the wounded from the Crimean War were being taken. So in the war, and the British and the French were fighting the Russians, the wounded were put in boats, sailed down to Scutari, the port where the hospital was, and it was ex-army Turkish barracks. They'd just adjusted it to become the hospital. And a war correspondent went over to report on the war effort, and he was shocked at what he saw. There was raw sewage in the corridors. And in that hospital, the death rate was 50%. In fact, the soldiers actually had a better chance, probably on the battlefront. So he wrote, it made headlines in the newspaper. He said, did we raise our young men to die like this? So the British people rose up. They were their sons, they were their nieces, their nephews, their grandsons. What's going on over there? And so the British government sent Florence and 35 nurses to Scutari to see what she could do. And she was shocked at what she saw. It was just filthy. And the doctors were not washing their hands between operations. And the doctor said, "You can't come in here, this is men's business." They let her in the kitchen. And in the kitchen there were big vats of water with bits of rotten meat in it. That was their food. I'm shocked that the death rate wasn't 80% when you look at the conditions. And Florence knew her limitations as a woman in 1854. But her father was a very wealthy man, and he was friends with people in Parliament. And she wrote I nearly said email, telegram. She wrote a telegram and she said, "We need a sanitary commission to come and assess what's happening in this hospital, especially when the report came back that the French troops were being better looked after." So they sent a sanitary commission over. And the sanitary commission had a look at the hospital. And what they found is that the hospital was built in a swamp. It had several stories. And in the swamp, they found a dead horse. And in the swamp, they found a dead dog. And the men in the hospital were drinking the water out of that swamp. And so very quickly, they drained the swamp, they got rid of the dead horse, the dead dog, they also got men to fix with the plumbing. So changes were being made. And then another shipload of wounded arrived in Scutari, 1,200 wounded men. The hospital was already overflowing. And so the doctor said to Florence and her nurses, "All right, you can come in." They needed help. But they hated Florence. She made them wash their hands between operations because they thought, what's the point? I'm already covered in blood. Why did Florence know these basic cleanliness principles and they did not? You might be surprised at the answer and you might not be. Florence read her Bible. And in the little book, The Ministry of Healing, there's a chapter in there called Hygienic Principles Amongst the Israelites. Very interesting. Just imagine Moses in the desert with millions of people. And what happens in most refugee camps? Disease, is that right? Sickness. But there was no sickness in this camp because God gave Moses strict rules. If a person wanted to go to the toilet, they had to go outside the camp, dig a hole, no one was to know they'd been there. If someone died in the camp, and the report is the only deaths were old age. If someone died in the camp, they were to be taken out of the camp, buried in a deep hole, And the people that carried the person out of the camp, the dead person, they weren't allowed to go back to the camp for 3 days. They had to wash their bodies, wash their clothes. Strict cleanliness rules. That's how Florence knew basic hygienic principles. And I think I mentioned the other day, it was in the 1850s, all the sewage from London went into the Thames, and the people living in London drank the water from the Thames. That's why we don't have any of those infectious diseases anymore. It's not because of the shots, no. It's because of hygiene, sanitation and nutrition. That's what's made the difference. It's just basic common sense. So Florence got in, and Florence also telegrammed her father and said, I need a shipload of clean linen, clean bandages, clean mattresses, scrubbing brushes and a cook. You cannot heal without nourishment. With all these drastic changes, within 2 months the death rate went from 50% to 2%. All she did was turn the tap off. You see, these microorganisms, they're just opportunist organisms. The more waste, the more rubbish, you call it trash, the more of these microorganisms. That's all she did. And in the late 1850s, the death rate of children in London was 25,000 a year. And there was a big push to get a new children's hospital. She said, we don't need a new children's hospital. We just need to teach mothers the basic principles of hygiene, sanitation and nutrition. That's what made the difference. And so after 14 months, Florence Nightingale went back to London, and she was on the boat, and she looked, there were a lot of people on the shore. She actually saw a royal party there. There was Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. They were hailing her as a heroine. She went back inside, changed her name to Mary Smith, went down the back gangplank and went home. And they said, why did you do that? She said, I'm not a heroine. She said, all I did was increase hygiene, sanitation and nutrition. She did not know what the fuss was about. Hygiene, that's personal hygiene. Wash your body every day, wash your clothes every day. Because we live in a self-healing organism, a self-cleansing organism. And for the body to be cleansed, the waste has to be thrown off, gets thrown off via the skin, gets thrown off via our urine. We looked at that in the detox yesterday. Gets thrown off via our colon. That waste must be taken away. Sanitation. Keep the house clean, sweep the floor every day, wash your bathroom every week, wash the dishes every day. In fact, we see it as just basic common sense, don't we? And nutrition. You cannot heal without nourishment. She made massive reforms also in Indian hospitals and changed the death rate there. We can't forget Florence Nightingale. She made massive reforms. And we feel the effect today. And she's the one that's read Louis Pasteur's theory, germs cause disease. She said this is the theory of a very unstable mind. And anyone who believes it is equally unstable. I'd like to look at another contemporary at the time of Louis Pasteur. His name was Antoine Béchamp. Most people have never heard his name. And this man was 6 times professor. Most of us will never get to 1. I've got some wonderful news though. The College of Naturopathic Medicine have just awarded me an associate professorship. Because of my work in the field. That's exciting. But Antoine Béchamp was 6 times professor. Louis Pasteur was a socialite and a chemist. He only gave half the theory. Antoine Béchamp spent most of his life in his laboratory looking at his microscope. And he knew that germs are the result. In fact, something he said was not very popular. And I think it's why Pasteur became popular. This is what Pasteur said: "You poor thing, you're sick because a germ jumped on you. Take this drug to kill the germ." Whereas Antoine Béchamp said, "Disease is born in us and of us." Well, no one to hear that. No one likes that theory. One day he got a dead cat. He wrapped it in an airtight container. He unwrapped it 4 months later. And when he unwrapped it, it was full of dust. What brought cat back to dust? Maybe a few bones as well. These microorganisms, who are an integral part of living, running cat, upon death of the organism, which is the ultimate cell damage, had to take their suit of clothes off, so to speak, put their rubber gloves and apron on and become the clean-up team. As the environment changed, the exterminators. As the environment changed, the undertakers. So their role was to bring the matter back to dust. That's what their role is. With great excitement, Antoine Béchamp got the dust from the dead cat, put it under his microscope. It was alive with microorganisms. A basic law of science states nothing's created, nothing's destroyed. It just changes roles. And this is why organically grown fruits and vegetables have a far higher nutrient content. It's because of what's done to the soil. Let me show you. Here's a plant. And this plant is in my garden at home. And these are the roots. And at home in my garden, well, in Misty's big garden, we have 3 compost bins. One we're adding to. We're adding scraps from the kitchen, we're adding weeds from the garden, and we like it when we have corn stalks because it aerates it a little bit, and we know that the cows in our neighbour aren't given any herbicides, insecticides, so sometimes we gather cow manure and put that in the compost bin. The second compost bin is sitting. It's just sitting. It's waiting for the cycle of life to bring the matter back to dust. The third compost bin, we're taking from that compost, we're putting it in our garden. And we know it's ready when the tomato plants and the pumpkin plants all start growing out of the compost bin. But I like to get in there and smell. In fact, I was reading one compost book, and they said they always get women to smell the compost because they've got a keener sense of smell. So what am I doing when I dig up that compost and put it in my garden? I'm putting in microorganisms. Now, these microorganisms play another role. In the soil, they are responsible for the breakdown of the minerals. Aren't you glad we don't have to eat dirt to get our minerals? We actually couldn't access it, it would just come out the other end. And my daughter Jessica, her little girl Lotus, she liked to eat dirt. And as a baby, Jess had put the baby on on the ground while she hung the clothes on the line. I used to do with my babies. And she'd crawl around the grass and play in the grass. You know, it's much better than the childhood shots to let the child play on the grass. But she'd get her little finger between the grass and get lumps of dirt. And the next day when Jessica changed the nappy, or you call it a diaper, what's in there? Dirt. Dirt. We actually can't access the minerals in it. It goes down in one end and out the other. It's a hollow tube, this gastrointestinal tract. A lady came to me one day so upset. I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but my 10-month-old baby ate some dog poo." I said, "It's all right, it'll just come out the other end." Have you seen what some children eat? It's going to be an interesting subject tomorrow when we look at child nutrition. My daughter Emma said to me she went to get her little 10-month-old baby. Seems to be between 10 and 12 months they'll eat anything. And he's on the windowsill eating all the ladybugs off the windowsill. And when she changes the nappy or diaper the next day, what's there? All the little ladybugs. You see, it's a hollow tube. It just goes in one ear and comes out the other. What these microorganisms do in the soil, they break down the minerals in the soil. And they are also responsible for the absorption of those minerals out of the soil and into the roots of the plants. These microorganisms also protect the plant against any harmful pathogens that might be in the soil. These microorganisms are responsible for the nourishment of the plant. And this explains why organically grown fruits and vegetables have a far higher mineral content. Because what an organic gardener does, he works with the soil. He feeds the soil. Now this plant knows that it needs those microorganisms. So 50% of the fuel that this plant makes from photosynthesis, it sends down to the roots to feed the microorganisms. Beautiful illustration of the law of service that's written on every plant in nature. Every plant takes with one purpose, to give. And it's the law of life. To give is to live. Have you discovered it? In our life, to give is to live. I love giving these lectures. It's my life. To give is to live. And we see that law on every plant in nature. That plant knows that it needs those microorganisms. So it says, please stay, I'll feed you well. We see this same process in the gastrointestinal tract. Our gastrointestinal tract is lined with villi. And they look just like the roots of a plant, don't they? And all through these villi is a blood capillary network. And that blood capillary network is where the nutrients from our food are absorbed into. Any food that goes into your gastrointestinal tract is not part of you or me till it gets broken down to tiny substances and then absorbed out of the gut and into the blood. Lining our gastrointestinal tract are microbiome. When we were in our mother's womb, our gut was sterile. But when we were born, we were literally showered with our mother's microorganisms. The two main microorganisms in our gut is Lactobacillus acidophilus, bifidobacterium. There are thousands, but they all come mostly from those two. And those microorganisms in our gut play a very similar role to what they play in the soil. Those microorganisms are responsible for the final breakdown of our food. Don't the enzymes in our mouth and our pancreas and our liver, don't they break the food down? They do. But these bacterias, they break down and release something else, B vitamins. They also cause the release of glutathione. Glutathione, we hear a lot about that as an antioxidant and a very powerful one. But you'll notice if you investigate it, it's not in food. It's released from our food by the action of these microorganisms in our gut. These microorganisms are also cause a release of melatonin. And melatonin is that hormone that helps us to sleep well at night. Remember we looked at it when we looked at sleep? It's our fix and rejuvenate nighttime hormone. These microorganisms are responsible for the absorption of our nutrients out of the gut and into the blood. These microorganisms protect our blood against any harmful pathogens that might be in the gut. These microorganisms are responsible for the nourishment of the little cells that line the gastrointestinal tract. Are you starting to see they're not our enemy? They're not our enemy. They're an integral part of life on the planet, in our body, in our gut. We've all been influenced by Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur, who has put this fear into so many people against germs. Is that right? I used to let my babies crawl on the grass, not in a park where are the dog droppings, on nice clean grass. I used to let them crawl in the sand. I would never let them crawl on the floor in a hospital. That's one of the worst places, because there's this kill mentality in a hospital. You've got to disinfect, 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 disinfect everywhere. And you know, in 2020, 2021, the messages were coming through a little bit here and there that it was far more effective to wash your hands with soap and water than put these disinfectants on everything. And there were some shops you couldn't go into unless you put it on. Is that right? I'd go like this. And then they let you in. But I never use them, because they're killing microorganisms. But I keep my hands clean. I wash my hands. It's just basic hygiene, sanitation and nutrition. And you've probably heard of the old saying, we've got more to fear from within than without. And in 2021, I did not stop hugging people. I did not stop shaking people's hands, because they're precious and they're important. Amen. And I hope that they never get away with that again. Yeah. I hope we all are more awake this time. But can you see the whole world closed down in 2020 because of this? And I'm surprised that even though my book's been out for about 10 years, it's still selling big time, and I think it's because my book, Self-Heal by Designs, goes into more detail, but it basically what I'm showing you here, because it's proving that 2020 was a great pretend. It was a great pretend. It was not what they said it was going to be. And the CDC figures state that 99% of people that got that strain of flu recovered. They're the Centre of Disease Control figures. My daughter Emma lives in Wisconsin. She's got a lot of Amish that live near her. And one of her neighbour's little 12-year-old boy, he drowned in a flooded creek. His clothes were caught on a stick. The ambulance came, took it away. On the death certificate it said died of COVID. Now, they were very upset, and they said, he drowned. He was dead when you arrived. They said, but we tested him and he tested positive. Every dead body will test positive, because as soon as a body dies, the cycle of life begins, and the cycle of life is made up of bacteria, yeast, fungus, viruses that are bringing matter back to dust. Every dead body will test positive. Can you see the craziness of that? And that's why 2020 happened only because of Louis Pasteur's theory. The theory that germs cause disease. That's only part of the theory. Have you noticed that when a cold goes round, some will get it and some won't? Because remember what I showed you yesterday, a cold is a house clean. And the ones that get it are the ones that the body's ready for a house clean. Let me give you a story that illustrates. It's the story of healthy Harry and sick Steve. They're brothers. They're living in the same house. Sick Steve has a terrible lifestyle. He doesn't hardly drink any water, lives on coffee, has too much to drink every night, lives in an office, never exercises, and he's a chronic smoker, packet a day, and his brother lives at the other end of the house. He's Healthy Harry. He's a landscaper, a surfer, eats plants, doesn't drink or smoke. And Sick Steve reckons Healthy Harry has taken all the fun out of life. We're going to look at fun in a minute. One day, Cousin Colin visits. He walks in the door and goes, "Achoo," and sneezes all over Sick Steve. He says, "Oh, sorry, mate, I got a cold." Have you ever seen under a microscope of what happens when someone sneezes? All these little droplets. And what's in the little droplets if someone's got a cold? What's a cold? It's a virus. And remember what they are? They're exterminators. They're cleaning up. Goes all over Sick Steve. And when it gets into Sick Steve, it says, "Yippee! Feast! Feast in this body. And look, there are some of our relatives down there. The yeast, fungus, bacterium." And they say, "Come on in. There's plenty for all." And by the end of the day, he's got a terribly sore throat. He's starting to cough up green lumps. But let's go back a bit. When Cousin Colin visits, Healthy Harry comes in the room. "How you going, mate?" That's what we say in Australia. "G'day, mate. How you going, mate?" Goes to shake his hands just as Cousin Colin sneezes again, all over Healthy Harry. But there's nothing to eat in Healthy Harry's body. So by the end of the day, Sick Steve's very sick, Healthy Harry, nothing. But let's go back. Let's say Healthy Harry's just been on a holiday to Hawaii, surfing. The air wasn't great in the plains. He couldn't eat as well as he usually did. And on the trip, he didn't get as much sleep. So there's a little bit happening in there. So Cousin Colin sneezes on him. It's a little bit slim pickings, but there's a little bit happening. And by the end of the day, he's got a sore throat. Immediately, Healthy Harry calls in the SWAT team. He has a flu bomb, garlic, ginger. The recipe's in my book. Garlic, ginger, lemon and honey, cayenne pepper, eucalyptus oil and hot water. Yeah, you drink it. He decides not to have a big tea that night, even though he's been working hard in the nursery. He just has a light soup. He goes to bed and he piles the blankets on and has a big sweat out at night. Creates a bit of a fever, wakes up in the morning. He's a bit tired because the fever it really takes it out of you. Has a big drink of water, has another drink of water, goes out and runs, has a run, comes back, has a hot and cold shower, more water, and then he has his antibiotic sandwich, slice of simple needs sourdough bread, olive oil, a whole clove of garlic, avocado, tomato, helps. Has another flu bomb, goes to work, feeling actually quite good. Let's look at Sick Steve. He wakes up, he's feeling miserable. He had to have a couple of Jack Daniels to put himself to sleep the night before. Put him to sleep, but he doesn't wake too good. Has a nice hot cup of coffee. That hot cup of coffee just eases his throat. Goes to the doctor. He loves this doctor. This doctor never asks uncomfortable questions like, "Are you still smoking? How much water are you drinking?" He doesn't like those doctors. And as soon as he comes in, the doctor picks up his pen, got his script. "What would you like today, Steve?" He says, "I'm feeling miserable." So he listens, gets his stethoscope, and he listens to the chest. Whoa, there's a party going on in there. Take this antibiotic. So he takes the antibiotic. He just loves this doctor because he never asks uncomfortable questions. I'm so glad that not every doctor is such. In fact, the World Health Organization are pressuring doctors, educating doctors, stop prescribing so many antibiotics. Have you ever analysed the word antibiotic? What does antibiotic mean? It means against, that's anti. What does biotic mean? Life. If we're living organisms, we've got to get away from the kill mentality, because anything that has the ability to kill a small organism has the potential to kill a large. Steve goes home, shuts all the windows, doesn't want a draft, breathing in his own waste, has lots of cups of coffee, takes his antibiotics, and within a couple of days he's feeling a little better and he goes back to work. Let's have a look. 5 years later. He's starting to cough up blood. He has a terrible problem with jock itch, anal itch. What's that all coming from? It's coming from the antibiotic, because an antibiotic is a mould. Alexander Fleming, 1929, he's growing bacteria in flasks in his laboratory. He comes in one morning and all his bacteria is dead. And he knew Newton's third law of motion: to every action there's an equal and an opposite reaction. Why his bacteria died. So he looks around the laboratory, nothing there could have done it, but there's an open window and the sun's coming in and he sees a heavy dust on the sun's rays and it's landing on his bacteria. So he searches where it's coming from, and in the next window next story there's an open window, and in the open window there's a plate of fruit, and in the plate of fruit there's a mouldy orange. And the dust from the mouldy orange came down, settled on his bacteria and killed it. He called the mould penicillium. Now the mould waste is more toxic than the mould. And it's the mould waste that was landing on his bacteria. So the mould waste he called penicillic acid. And that penicillic acid is the penicillin that we know today. And penicillic acid has saved the lives of millions. There's no doubt about that. But I love Florence Nightingale's story, because this was 80 years before antibiotics. And the death rate went from 50% to 2%. And unfortunately, because of antibiotics, people go to the antibiotics and forget the true cause of disease. Notice that these microorganisms adapt and adjust. And when antibiotics, which kill, when they're constantly thrown at the bacteria, you know what that bacteria starts to do? Adapt and adjust. You've heard of golden staph? Golden staph strikes fear in the hearts of many people, because this is a microorganism that adapt and adjusted and hardly anything will kill it. That's why it's important to know what the microorganisms are and know what their role is. To date, they have tested millions. I used to say 5 million, and my husband, who's my biggest critique, if I pass Michael, I'll pass anyone, he says 5 million, that's over the top. I said, search me out, investigate. He came back, he said 25 million. Different moulds, yeasts and funguses. And every mould can have 3 or 4 different types of mould wastes. The other day I gave the story when we looked at cancer of Dr. Colin Campbell, and he found that children in the Philippines were dying of liver cancer between the age of 8 and 10 years of age. And he traced it to a mould grown on peanuts that gives off a mould waste called aflatoxin. So the mould is Aspergillus, and the mould waste is aflatoxin. in America and in Australia, all grain, all peanuts are all tested for aflatoxin, because aflatoxin causes liver cancer. And different mould wastes have different effects on different bodies. But as Colin Campbell found, he got 20 rats and he injected every one of them with aflatoxin. 10 of them, he gave 20% animal protein. The other 10, he gave 5% animal protein. What's 20% animal protein? That would be meat and dairy every meal on human standard. What's 5% animal protein? Just a very small amount of meat, maybe a tiny little bit of dairy once a day. At the end of 2 years, because the rats live 2 years, and their gut is very similar to humans, so they can see what would happen to a human in 70 years will happen to a rat in 2 years. After 2 years, every rat on the 20% animal protein was dead or dying of liver cancer. And on the 5% animal protein rats, there was no cancer. And yet they'd all been injected with aflatoxin. We are all exposed to these microorganisms. But what do they find when they come into our body? Is there a place to live, or is there nothing to do? And on his deathbed, Louis Pasteur refuted his theory. He said Bernard was right. Bernard was another contemporary at the time of Louis Pasteur who also agreed with Antoine Béchamp that germs don't cause disease, they're the result of unhealthful conditions. Béchamp and Bernard. And this is what Pasteur said. Bernard was right. The microbe is nothing. The germ is nothing. The terrain is everything. What's the terrain? That's what they called our body. The terrain, or the body, is everything. Those microorganisms are everywhere. But what do they find when they come in? It's like sick Steve. There is a veritable feast in his body, so they certainly had a party. And he's coughing up green and yellow lumps because the cigarette caused so much damage, and then his body's own microorganisms are changing roles into bacteria, yeast and fungus to clean up the mess. Let's go back to sick Steve. It's 5 years later and he's coughing up blood. He goes to the doctor, has a scan, has a biopsy, he's got lung cancer. And he says to his brother, healthy Harry, "Why me?" Have you heard that saying? Why me? I'm surprised it didn't happen earlier, when you consider what he was doing to his lungs. And then he goes to the doctor who offers / poison and burn, operation, chemo, radiotherapy. Healthy Harry comes and says, "Look, can I shout you a week or 2 weeks at Eden Valley Health Retreat to consider your options, because you have got time. You've got time." And the amount of people that have come to our retreat and said, "If only I'd have time to think." You do. Don't let anyone pressure you. You've got time to think. At the retreat, he hears the lectures, the light bulb goes off, the cigarettes that he snuck into his bag, he picks up and he throws into the bin, the trash can. He says, "This is what I want to do. I want to give my body the right conditions for healing." So there's no doubt about it that mould is a toxic poison. But the question is, why is it in the body? It's an opportunist organism. It's just going to live where it's getting well fed. So Dr. Colin Campbell, he was trained in medicine. He was trained that you have protein. The protein you must have is meat, and for calcium you must have milk. So when he went to the Philippines, he presumed that the poorer children would be dying because, their food would be a bit deficient, and the wealthy children would living. Well, the opposite was true. The poorer children were living because they're having lots of greens, they're having rice, soy, a little bit of fish, whereas the city children, Time magazine calls it the meat sweet diet, high meat, high dairy, high sugar, refined. They were the ones that were dying. And this really confronted him. And after all the research he did and what he looked at, he became a plant-based diet. And his friends said to him, "You're taking all the fun out of life." He said, "Well, I discovered this in my 50s. He said, "I'm in my 70s now. Fun." He said, "Most of my friends are overweight. Some of them have already died. Some of them rattle when they walk. They're on so much medication. Some of them are on little carts now. They can't hardly even walk from the car to the..." He said, "And I'm climbing mountains with my grandchildren." He said, "I'll tell you what fun is." What's that poem again? Choose your hard. Choose your hard. He's enjoying the latter years of his life. But unfortunately, most of his friends are not. What's fun? Fun is feeling good every day of your life. That's what fun is. So we've looked at how the mould can get into the body, how the yeast and fungus. How do you get it out? Well, remember, it's an opportunist organism, and it's very similar to what we looked at when we looked at cancer. You've got to starve it. What's its favourite food? Sugar and yeast. And you've got to stop anything that's coming in to damage. In my book, Self-Heal by Design, there's the antifungal stage 1 diet, and that's the only fruit is Granny Smith apple and grapefruit because it's very low sugar. And a couple of months on that, and then go over to the antifungal stage 2, which is now berries. Berries are low glycemic too. So it's just a little bit more and a little bit more carbohydrates. In my next lecture where we look at diabetes, I'm going to look in detail at carbohydrates. Number 2, kill. There are some herbs that will kill fungus. Garlic's good. Olive leaf extract is high in antifungal actives, as is grapefruit seed extract, as is oregano or oregano, you call it. Essential oil, start small. Number 3, bring back the balance. It's all about balance in the gastrointestinal tract. So flood the gut with the good guys. That's your probiotics. And you can get probiotic in a powder form, and you can also get your probiotic foods, which are sauerkraut, kefir, yogurts, misos. And alkalize the body. How do you alkalize? Lots of vegetables, especially green leafies. One man sent me a photograph of his toenails. He's had fungus toenails for the last 20 years. He was in his 70s. And I got this big photograph of his toenails. They were coming through clear. Because he'd been on this diet internally. See, our skin, our nails, they're all an indication of what's happening inside our body. And we've seen many people conquer sometimes yeast problems that they've had for a long, long time by going on the antifungal diet. That's the good news. It is true that there is a link between cancer and fungus, but not everyone that has a yeast problem in their body has cancer or will get cancer. It's an opportunist organism. The more it's fed, the stronger it gets. It's as simple as that. I wrote my book, Self-Heal by Design, because I was alarmed at the amount of ignorance there is on the dangers of moles. When I was at Living Springs Retreat about 5 years ago now, there was a lady there who was filming me, and I noticed she kept scratching. And I said, "What's going on with you?" Because she'd filmed me a few years ago. She said, and she got her phone and showed me a photo of her. And her face was swollen and she had huge welts on her body. I said, "What happened?" She said, "Well, I was living in a trailer and I was getting sicker and sicker. And I had to stop work, and I was lying in bed one day and I looked at the wall at the end of my bed and I noticed this black thing, a sort of a growth on the wall." And I didn't think much about it. And the next day, it had spread more. It was black mould. And she'd noticed that if she went and stayed with a girlfriend for the weekend, she'd feel so much better. But when she got back into that trailer, what she didn't realise is that the other side of the wall was the bathroom, and in the wall there was a leaking tap, and the mould was growing. And so she got out of that trailer. It actually had to be demolished. It was so bad. She got out of the trailer and she was much better, but she's still scratching. Still scratching. And I said, "Are you eating wheat?" "Yes," she said. And in my next lecture I'll show you how the wheat, when it was hybridised, produced a starch structure that gets the blood sugar level up higher than even sugar. I'll be showing you how that is. And she loves sugar. And she loves fruit. So she was on a high carbohydrate, high sugar diet. So she's out of the mouldy trailer, but she hasn't addressed that mold presence in her body. And she certainly is better. She hasn't got the big welts on her anymore. So she went on the antifungal diet. She took the herbs. She went over to simple Mead's bread instead of the wheat bread. And what that did was enabled her to totally heal. So you can get out of that mouldy house, and that's necessary, but it's still in the body. And that's where the antifungal diet, with its low sugars, starves it. The herbs kill it off, flood the gut with the good guys, bring the balance back, and alkalise the body with more vegetables, lots of dark green leafy vegetables. And we've seen people that have been challenged with this for years heal, and that's the good news. When I married Michael, he used to wake me, I'd wake at night with him scratching. So we married in 1997. He was 40. And I wondered why his toes just would flare up so badly. And I'd hear him scratching his feet, and he had quite bad anal itch as well. So I decided to put him on a strict diet, but I wanted to know why. He said he thought he'd had it for 10 years. He thought he just had to live with it. And then he told me the background. When he was, I think he was late 20s, he had to get his wisdom teeth out because they were crowding and they were hurting him. So he decided to do it on the cheap and let the students in the dental hospital do it. So they knocked him out and they were winding his jaw open and they broke his jaw. And when he woke up, his face was like this. He said that he would press his cheeks and the pus would just pour out. And he was just so annoyed that he discharged himself from hospital and went home to his flat. And there's a little old lady next door watching him, and she said, "I can tell you're dying. I'm taking you to the doctor." So he was taken to the doctor on 2 courses of very strong antibiotics. And that certainly knocked it back. There's no doubt about it that antibiotics have saved lives, but the problem today is the overuse of it. What I do, and what I do with all my children, you nip it in the bud. If there's sore foot and it's getting pussy, you do hot and colds and a poultice on it, then don't go anywhere. And in my book, Sustain Me, I've got a whole chapter on water therapies, a whole chapter on the poultices. As soon as you see a problem, you deal with it. Well, he didn't know what to do and it just got worse, worse, worse. The antibiotic saved his life, but here we are 10 years later, because when he took the antibiotics, what did he put in his body? Mould. How many people take an antibiotic and then get thrush? And again, it only really hangs her out where it's getting well fed. And Michael was a bachelor with 2 little children before we married. And you know what's really easy for a vegetarian bachelor with 2 children? Fruit. Fruit, bread and cereal. That's about what they were living on, fruit, bread and cereal. And what's the fruit, bread and cereal doing? Just feeding it. So I put him on a very strict diet. And of course he didn't care because I'm doing all the cooking. And for 6 weeks I said no fruit. He said he thought his arm was cut off. But I made the food very nice, and I made him, and his favourite breakfast still is today, sourdough toast, avocado and red lentils, or sourdough toast, avocado and scrambled tofu. So it was more a savoury diet. And at the end of 6 weeks, when I said he could now have a little fruit, he said, I quite like those vegetables for breakfast. So we're 15 years later now, I think, and when I'm home, I still make him vegetables for breakfast. Does he eat fruit? He does, but he doesn't eat it near the way he used to. And all the scratching at night stopped. All the toes, the jock itch, everything cleared up. You see, it's an internal thing. People want to put things on it, but you've got to address the cause, which is internally. So it was a few experiences I had, and certainly one that Michael had when I saw the results, and he is so happy because he thought he just was going to have to live with that for the rest of his life, but not so. Another illustration of this incredible body we live in, its inbuilt ability to rebalance and to heal when we give it the right conditions. It's time for a break, and after the break we're going to look at diabetes.